My father spoke. Cert title. I remember the exact moment my wedding stopped feeling like a dream and started feeling like a trap. It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. The music was soft, the lights were warm, and every guest was smiling like they were watching a perfect love story unfold. But I wasn't smiling. Not really. Because deep inside, I already knew something was wrong. You know that feeling? When everything looks perfect on the outside, but your gut keeps whispering. Something is about to go very, very wrong. I tried to ignore it. I really did. I told myself I was just nervous. Every bride feels nervous, right? But what I didn't know was that within the next hour, I would be humiliated in front of everyone I loved, and the people who did it were about to regret it for the rest of their lives. My name is Emily, and for most of my life, I believed in simple things: love, respect, family. I wasn't rich. I didn't come from a powerful background. But my father, he was everything to me. He raised me alone after my mom passed away. Quiet man, humble, never showed off, never talked about money. But he always made sure I had everything I needed, even if it meant he had nothing left for himself. So when I met Daniel, I thought I had finally found someone like him. Kind, calm, understanding. At least, that's what I thought. Daniel came from a different world. His family had money, real money, the kind that makes people act differently. His mother, Mrs. Carter, she never liked me. Not from the beginning. She never said it directly, but you could feel it in her tone, in her smile, in the way she looked at my clothes, like she was measuring my worth and finding me lacking. Still, Daniel told me not to worry. They'll come around, he said. They just need time. I wanted to believe him, so I ignored the small signs, the passive comments, the subtle insults, because I loved him. And I believed love was enough. I was wrong. A week before the wedding, I overheard something I was never supposed to hear. I had gone to Daniel's parents' house to finalize some wedding details. Everything seemed normal, until I walked past the living room and heard Mrs. Carter's voice. "She's not one of us, Daniel." I froze. I wasn't even breathing. Daniel sighed. "Mom, not this again." "She doesn't belong in this family," she continued. "People will talk." And then came the words that stayed with me. "She's cheap." Cheap. Just like that. Years of my life, reduced to one word. I waited, hoping Daniel would defend me, that he would stand up, say something, anything. But instead, there was silence. Long, heavy, painful silence. And in that silence, I learned the truth. Sometimes, silence is louder than any insult. I quietly left the house that day. I didn't confront him. I didn't cry. Not yet. Because deep down, I was still hoping that maybe, just maybe, I was overthinking everything. The wedding venue was beautiful, exactly how I had imagined it. White flowers everywhere, soft music, golden lights, guests laughing. Everything looked perfect. Too perfect. My father arrived early, wearing a simple black suit, the same one he wore to every important event. But to me, he looked like the strongest man in the world. He smiled when he saw me. "You look just like your mother," he said softly. That almost broke me, because for a moment, I felt safe. Like no matter what happened, he was there. And then, Daniel's family arrived, and the air changed. You could feel it, the tension, the quiet judgment. Mrs. Carter walked in like she owned the place, her eyes scanning everything, then landing on me. That same look, cold, measuring, disapproving. She smiled, but it wasn't real. "Oh, Emily," she said, hugging me lightly. "You did your best. Your best. Not beautiful, not perfect. Just your best." I smiled back, because what else could I do? The ceremony started. Everything went smoothly. Vows were exchanged. People clapped. We were officially married. But the real story hadn't even begun yet. It happened during the reception, right when everyone was relaxed, laughing, drinking, enjoying the night. Mrs. Carter stood up, tapped her glass. "I'd like to say a few words," she announced. The room went quiet. I felt my chest tighten. Something about her tone. It wasn't right. She smiled, looked at Daniel, then at me, and began. "Marriage is about equality," she said, "and sometimes compromise." People nodded, listening, unaware of what was coming. "But let's be honest," she continued, her voice sharper now. "Not everyone enters a marriage with the same value." My heart stopped. I looked at Daniel. He avoided my eyes, and that's when I knew this wasn't an accident. "She comes from very humble beginnings," she said, smiling politely. Some guests laughed softly, and then she said it. In fact, when Daniel told me about her, I thought, well, at least she's trying to rise above her situation. The room shifted. People looked at me, some uncomfortable, some curious, some amused. And then the final blow. But let's not pretend. This marriage isn't a step up for her. Silence. Loud, crushing silence. I felt every eye in the room on me. My face burned. My hands trembled. This was my wedding, my moment, and she had turned it into a stage to humiliate me. I looked at Daniel, waiting, begging, for him to say something, to stand up, to defend me. But he didn't. He just sat there, quiet, again, that same silence. And this time, it broke something inside me. I wanted to disappear, run away, leave everything behind. But I didn't. I stood there, frozen, humiliated, alone. And then I heard a chair move, slow, deliberate, heavy. I turned my head and saw my father standing up. The room went silent again. But this time, it felt different. Because my father never spoke in public, never raised his voice, never made scenes. But the look on his face, I had never seen it before. Calm, but powerful. Quiet, but dangerous. He walked forward, step by step. Every eye in the room followed him, Even Mrs. Carter looked confused. And then he stopped right beside me, placed his hand gently on my shoulder, and looked directly at her. And when he finally spoke, his voice was steady, controlled, but filled with something deeper, something that made the entire room hold its breath. "Since we're talking about value," he said slowly, "maybe it's time everyone here knows the truth. Since we're talking about value, maybe it's time everyone here knows the truth." My father's voice didn't rise. He didn't shout. But somehow, everyone heard him. Even the waiters stopped moving. Even the music seemed to disappear. Mrs. Carter let out a small, awkward laugh. "Oh, this should be interesting," she said, crossing her arms. She thought this was a joke. She thought my father was just another quiet man trying to defend his daughter. She had no idea what was about to happen. My father didn't look at her again. Instead, he turned slightly toward the guests, calm, composed, like a man who had nothing to prove, but everything to reveal. "I've stayed quiet for a long time," he said, "not because I didn't see what was happening." He paused, then looked directly at Daniel, "but because I wanted to see if you would." Daniel shifted in his seat, uncomfortable, caught. "And now I know," my father continued, "exactly what kind of man my daughter married." The room tightened. You could feel it, that invisible pressure, right before everything breaks. Carter scoffed. "Oh, please," she said, "let's not turn this into drama." My father nodded slowly. "You're right," he said. "This isn't drama." And then he reached into his jacket, pulled out a simple envelope. Nothing fancy, just plain, ordinary, the kind of envelope no one pays attention to until they realize it holds everything. "I didn't come here to argue," he said. "I came here to make sure my daughter was respected." He looked at me for a moment, and in his eyes, I saw something I hadn't seen in years. Not just love, not just care, but certainty. Like he had been waiting for this moment. "Clearly," he added softly, "that didn't happen." Mrs. Carter rolled her eyes. "This is unnecessary," she snapped. "Whatever you think you're proving." "I'm not proving anything," my father interrupted. For the first time, his tone changed, still calm, but firm, final. "I'm revealing." 9. He handed the envelope to me. My hands were shaking. I didn't even know why. I opened it slowly. Inside were documents. Official. Stamped. Legal. I stared at them. At first, nothing made sense. But then, my eyes caught a name. A company name. One I had seen before. Many times. On buildings. On advertisements. On business news. My heart skipped. "No," I whispered. It couldn't be. I looked up at him, confused, shocked. "Dad, what is this?" He didn't answer me. Not yet. Instead, he turned back to the room. "To everyone here," he said clearly, "I think you should know something about my daughter." Mrs. Carter crossed her arms tighter. "This is ridiculous." "My daughter," he continued, ignoring her, is the legal owner of the Carter Development Group. Silence. Not normal silence. The kind of silence that feels like the air has been pulled out of the room. Someone dropped a glass. It shattered. But no one moved, because no one could process what they had just heard. Mrs. Carter blinked. Once, twice, then laughed, loud, sharp. "That's not funny," she said. "That company belongs to my husband." My father nodded. "It did," he said. All eyes turned to Daniel. His face had gone pale, completely pale, like all the color had drained out of him. "Daniel?" Mrs. Carter said, her voice tightening. "What is he talking about?" Daniel didn't answer. He couldn't, because he already knew. And that's when everything changed. My father stepped closer. Slow. Controlled. "6 months ago," he said, "the majority shares of your family company were quietly acquired." Mrs. Carter shook her head. No, that's impossible." "Is it?" my father asked. She turned to her husband, but he wasn't looking at her. He was staring at the floor, silent, defeated. And in that moment, the truth hit her, hard. "You," she whispered. "You knew?" He didn't respond, didn't need to. The silence said everything. I was still standing there, holding those papers, trying to understand how my entire life had just flipped upside down. "Dad," I said softly, "why didn't you tell me?" He finally looked at me, and his expression softened. "Because," he said gently, "I didn't want you to marry into power." He paused. "I wanted to see if they deserved you without it." That hit me harder than anything else that night. Not the insult, not the humiliation, but that. Because he had trusted them, given them a chance, and they had failed, completely. Mrs. Carter's voice cut through the silence. "This is a lie," she snapped. "There's no way she owns anything." My father didn't react. He simply nodded toward the documents in my hand. "Read the last page," he said. I did. And there it was. Clear, undeniable. My name, ownership, signature, everything. My knees almost gave out, because suddenly, everything made sense. The quiet investments, the long phone calls he used to take, the sacrifices, the years he spent working late. He wasn't just working, he was building something. For me, I looked at Daniel, really looked at him, for the first time that day. And what I saw wasn't love, wasn't regret. It was fear, pure fear. "You knew," I said quietly. He swallowed. I found out last week," he admitted. The words hit like a slap. "Last week?" I repeated. He nodded slowly. "I didn't know how to tell you." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "So you let your mother humiliate me?" My voice cracked. "Knowing I owned your entire world?" He didn't answer, because there was no answer that could fix that. And that's when I realized something important. This wasn't just about them not respecting me. This was about them thinking they were above me, better than me, stronger than me. And now, everything had flipped. Mrs. Carter stepped forward. Her confidence was gone, replaced with desperation. "This changes nothing," she said quickly. "Marriage is about family, not money." My father raised an eyebrow. Interesting, he said calmly, because a few minutes ago, you seemed very focused on value. She froze, caught in her own words. And then, for the first time that night, I spoke, clearly, strongly, without fear. No, I said. It changes everything. The room turned to me, and for once, I wasn't the girl being judged. I wasn't the one being measured. I was the one in control. I walked into this marriage thinking I was joining a family, I continued. But now, I see. I looked directly at Daniel. I was walking into a transaction. His face fell. Emily, please. No, I said, shaking my head. For once, you listen. I took a deep breath. My heart was still racing, but my voice was steady. You had a choice, I said to him. You could have stood up for me. You could have stopped her. You could have respected me. I paused. Before any of this. Tears filled his eyes. I'm sorry, he said. I really am. And maybe, at another time, that would have been enough. But not now. Not after everything. Because some apologies come too late. I turned to my father, and for the first time that night, I smiled, not out of happiness, but out of clarity. Because I finally understood something. This wasn't just a moment. This was a turning point. And what happened next would define everything. Dad, I said softly. Thank you. He nodded, proud, quietly proud. Then I turned back to the room, to the guests, to the people who had just watched me get humiliated, and then rise. This wedding, I said slowly, is over. Gasps filled the room, but I wasn't done, not even close. However, I added, my voice sharper now, this story isn't. The moment the words left my mouth, this wedding is over. It felt like the entire room stopped breathing. No music, no whispers, just silence, thick and heavy, pressing down on everyone. And for the first time that night, I wasn't the one breaking. I was the one in control. Daniel stood up so fast his chair nearly fell backward. Emily, wait, please don't do this, he said, his voice shaking now. Funny, just minutes ago he couldn't even look at me. Now suddenly he had so much to say. I looked at him calmly. No, I said. You already did this. His face twisted with panic. It's not what you think. Then tell me what it is, I cut in. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Because there was nothing left to say. No explanation could erase what had already happened. No excuse could undo that silence. And deep down, he knew it. His mother stepped forward again, trying to regain control. This is ridiculous, she snapped. You're overreacting. It was just a speech. I turned slowly toward her, and this time, I didn't smile. Just a speech? I repeated. Yes, she said quickly, clinging to whatever authority she thought she still had. People make jokes at weddings all the time. A joke, I said softly. Then I nodded. Okay. I took a step closer. So let me make one too. Her expression faltered, and before she could respond, I raised the papers in my hand slightly. Here's a funny one, I said. You spent years building your reputation, your status, your so-called value. I paused just long enough for the room to lean in. And tonight, you insulted the person who owns it all. A ripple went through the crowd. You could feel it. That shift. That moment when people stop judging and start choosing sides. Mrs. Carter's face turned pale. "This doesn't change anything," she said again. But this time her voice wasn't as strong. "It changes everything," I replied. And then I did something no one expected. I turned to the guests, all of them, friends, family, business associates, people who had just watched me be humiliated and had said nothing. "I'm sorry you had to witness this," I said, my voice steady. "But I won't stand here and pretend this is a family worth joining." No one spoke. No one argued. Because deep down, they knew I was right. Daniel stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Emily, we can fix this," he whispered. "We'll talk to my parents. We'll sort everything out." I shook my head slowly. "You still don't get it," I said. "This isn't about fixing anything." He frowned. "Then what is it about?" I looked him straight in the eyes. "It's about who you are." That hit him harder than anything else. Because now, this wasn't about money, or power, or reputation. It was about character, and his had just been exposed. "I loved you," I continued quietly. "I trusted you." "I know," he said quickly. "And I love you too." "No," I interrupted. "You loved the idea of me." His expression cracked. "You loved someone you thought needed you, someone beneath you, someone you could protect." I took a small step back. "But the moment you realized I didn't need you," I let the silence finish the sentence, because everyone already understood. His shoulders dropped, defeated. And in that moment, I stopped seeing him as the man I was about to marry, and started seeing him for what he really was, just another person who underestimated me. Behind me, I felt my father's presence, steady, unshaken. He didn't interrupt. He didn't guide me. He just stood there, letting me take control of my own story. And for the first time in my life, I did. I turned back to the center of the room. "This reception is over," I said clearly. "Anyone who came here to celebrate love, I'm sorry." I paused. "But if you stayed to watch someone be humiliated," my voice hardened slightly, "then I hope you learned something tonight." A few people looked down, ashamed. Others avoided eye contact, because truth has a way of making people uncomfortable. Mrs. Carter let out a sharp breath. "You think this is over?" she said, her voice trembling with anger now. "You think you can just walk away and destroy everything?" I tilted my head slightly. "Destroy?" I repeated. Then I smiled faintly. "I didn't destroy anything." I looked around the room one last time. "You did." And with that, I turned, took my father's arm, and walked out. Just like that. No dramatic music, no shouting, no chaos. Just quiet footsteps, echoing through a room that would never feel the same again. The car ride home was silent, but it wasn't the painful kind of silence. It was calm, clear, like the storm had already passed, and now everything was settling. I stared out the window, watching the city lights blur past, trying to process everything that had just happened. "Are you okay?" my father asked gently. I nodded, then shook my head. I don't know, I admitted. He smiled softly. That's okay. After a moment, I turned to him. You knew, didn't you? I asked. Knew what? That they would do something like this. He didn't answer right away. Then he sighed. I hoped they wouldn't, he said, but I needed to be sure. I swallowed. And now? He looked at me. Now I know my daughter deserves better. That simple sentence meant more than everything else that night, because it reminded me of something important. I hadn't lost anything. I had escaped. The next morning, everything changed. Not slowly, not quietly, but all at once. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Messages, calls, notifications. The video had already started spreading. Of course it had. A wedding, a public humiliation, a shocking reveal. It was exactly the kind of story people couldn't look away from. I watched a short clip someone had posted. Just a few seconds. Mrs. Carter speaking. Then my father stepping in. Then the silence. Even through the screen, you could feel the tension. I turned the phone off. I didn't need to see more, because I already knew what was coming. Daniel called. Again, and again, and again. I didn't answer. Not yet. Because this time, I wasn't reacting. I was thinking, planning, understanding. Because what happened last night wasn't the end. It was the beginning. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of what came next. I was ready for it. My father walked into the room, holding a cup of coffee. Busy morning? He asked. I gave a small smile. You could say that. He sat across from me, calm as always. What do you want to do? He asked. That question, it mattered. Because for once, the choice was entirely mine. I took a deep breath, then looked up at him. They wanted to talk about value, I said slowly. He nodded. So let's show them what that really means. And in that moment, the plan began. Not out of anger, not out of revenge alone, but out of something deeper. Justice. Because some people don't learn from kindness. They don't understand respect. They only understand consequences. And this time, they were going to learn the hard way. Later that afternoon, I finally answered Daniel's call. There was a long pause on the other end. Then his voice, soft, broken. Emily. I didn't say anything at first. I let him sit in that silence, the same silence he gave me. I messed up, he said. I know I did. Yes, I replied simply. I want to fix it. You can't. Another pause, longer this time. What do you mean? He asked. I mean, I said calmly, some things don't get fixed. They end. His breathing changed, sharp, uneven. You don't mean that. I do. Emily, please, don't do this. We can start over. We can leave everything behind. I closed my eyes for a moment, then spoke slowly. You had your chance to choose me, I said. You didn't. And with that, I ended the call. Not with anger, not with tears, but with certainty, because this time, I wasn't the one being left behind. I was the one walking away, and this story was far from over. The next few days were quiet, too quiet, the kind of quiet that makes people uncomfortable, but not me, because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't reacting to chaos. I was preparing for it. The calls stopped after a while. Not because Daniel gave up, but because something else started happening, something bigger, something he couldn't control. The story spread, faster than I expected. Clips from the wedding were everywhere. People weren't just watching, they were talking, choosing sides, and most of them weren't on his. I didn't need to check constantly. I didn't need validation. But the truth was obvious. Public humiliation works both ways. And now, it was their turn. 3 days later, I walked into the Carter Development Group headquarters, not as a guest, not as someone's fiancé, but as the owner. The building looked exactly how I remembered it. Tall, polished, impressive. The kind of place designed to make people feel small. Funny how different it felt now. The receptionist looked up as I entered. "Can I help you?" she asked politely. I gave a small smile. "Yes," I said. "I believe you can." I placed a copy of the documents on the desk. Her eyes scanned the page, and just like that, her expression changed. Confusion, then shock, then immediate respect. "Oh, of course, ma'am," she said quickly, standing up. "Please, right this way." Ma'am. That word used to feel distant. Now it felt earned. As I walked through the office, I noticed the shift instantly. People whispering, looking, recognizing me. Not as the girl from the wedding, but as something else entirely, something they hadn't expected, something they had underestimated. The boardroom doors opened, and inside, they were already there. Daniel, his father, Mrs. Carter, and a few board members, all sitting around the table, waiting, but not confidently, not comfortably. No, they looked like people who already knew the outcome and were just waiting for it to be confirmed. Mrs. Carter's eyes locked onto mine the moment I walked in. Sharp, cold, but beneath it, fear. "You have some nerve showing up here," she said. I didn't react, didn't argue. I simply walked to the head of the table and sat down. Her seat, not mine, but now, it was. "I didn't come to argue," I said calmly. "I came to begin." Daniel stood up. "Emily, please, let's not do this here." I looked at him, really looked, and for the first time, I saw no power in him, no control, just someone trying to hold on to something already lost. "You should sit down," I said quietly. "This won't take long." He hesitated, then slowly sat, because deep down, he knew. This wasn't a discussion. It was a decision. I placed the documents in front of me, neatly, carefully. "This company," I began, "has been operating under the assumption that control has not changed." I paused. Let that sink in. "That assumption is incorrect." A board member cleared his throat. "Legally speaking, the ownership transfer is valid," he admitted, glancing at the others. Mrs. Carter snapped her head toward him. "You're not seriously accepting this," she said. He didn't respond, because facts don't care about emotions. And right now, the facts weren't on her side. "I am not here to take revenge," I continued. That caught their attention. Even Daniel looked up slightly. "I am here to restore balance." Mrs. Carter laughed bitterly. "Balance," she repeated. "You humiliated us in front of everyone." I tilted my head slightly. "No," I said calmly. "You did that to yourselves." Silence. Again. Because there was nothing to argue with. I leaned forward slightly. Effective immediately, I said. There will be changes. The room stiffened, realization settling in. This wasn't symbolic. This wasn't emotional. This was real. First, I continued, all executive roles will be reviewed, Mrs. Carter's hands tightened on the table. You can't just walk in here and... I can, I said simply. And I am. She froze, because she knew I was right. I turned to Daniel's father. He looked older than I remembered, tired, defeated. I respect what you built, I said, and I won't erase that. He nodded slightly, grateful, but cautious. However, I shifted my gaze to Mrs. Carter. I will not allow this company to be run on ego and disrespect. Her face hardened. You're making a mistake, she said. Am I? I asked calmly. Yes, she said, because you don't understand how this world works. I held her gaze, steady, unshaken. No, I said quietly. I understand it perfectly now. I sat back, calm, controlled. The board will remain, I continued, but leadership will change. Daniel looked up. Emily, he said softly, but I didn't stop. Daniel Carter. My voice was clear, professional, distant. Your position is under review, effective immediately. His face dropped, like he had been expecting it, but still hoped it wouldn't happen. You're serious, he said. Yes. Mrs. Carter slammed her hand on the table. This is personal, she snapped. I shook my head. No, I said. If this were personal, I paused, just long enough. You wouldn't be sitting here right now. That shut her down instantly, because she understood the meaning behind it. This wasn't revenge. This was restraint. And somehow, that made it worse. I stood up slowly. This company will move forward, I said, with or without those who refuse to respect others. I looked around the room, at every face, every expression, fear, regret, acceptance. This is your opportunity, I added, to choose what kind of people you want to be. No one spoke, because moments like this don't need noise. They need truth. As I turned to leave, Daniel stood up again. Emily, wait. I stopped, but I didn't turn around. I never wanted to hurt you, he said. His voice broke slightly, and for a moment, there it was, that small piece of the man I once loved. But it was too late. Intentions don't matter, I said quietly. Actions do. And then I walked out. Outside the building, the air felt different, lighter, clearer, like something heavy had finally been lifted. My father was waiting by the car, leaning casually, like he had all the time in the world. How did it go? He asked. I smiled slightly. It's done. He nodded, not surprised, not overly impressed, just proud. And that was enough. As we drove away, I looked back at the building one last time, not with anger, not with regret, but with clarity, because I finally understood something important. Revenge isn't about destroying others, it's about reclaiming yourself. And in that moment, I had done exactly that. But deep down, I knew something else. This wasn't over. Not completely. Because people like Mrs. Carter don't accept defeat easily. They resist. They fight. They try to take back control. And when they do, that's when the final chapter begins. And this time, I would be ready. It didn't come with shouting or threats or dramatic confrontations. It came quietly, strategically, exactly the way people like Mrs. Carter preferred to operate. And that's how I knew she wasn't done. A week passed. On the surface, everything looked stable. The company continued running. The board complied. Daniel stayed silent. Too silent. But underneath, things were shifting. Subtle things. Meetings being scheduled without informing me. Decisions being delayed. Emails that felt carefully worded. Respectful on the outside. Resistant underneath. And then one morning, I got the confirmation. She's trying to turn the board against you. One of the senior advisors told me quietly over the phone. I didn't react immediately. I had been expecting this. On what grounds? I asked calmly. They're saying you're inexperienced, emotional, not fit to lead. I almost smiled. Not because it was funny, but because it was predictable. When people lose power, they don't admit defeat. They question legitimacy. They want an emergency vote, he added. That part was interesting, because that meant one thing. They were desperate, and desperation leads to mistakes. That afternoon, I sat alone in my office, looking out over the city, thinking, not emotionally, not impulsively, strategically, because this wasn't about reacting to her move. It was about ending it, completely. My father walked in quietly. He didn't ask questions. He never did. He just sat across from me. They're making their move, I said. He nodded. And what are you going to do? I leaned back slightly. Let them. He raised an eyebrow. Confident? No, I said honestly. Prepared. That was the difference. Confidence can fail. Preparation doesn't. The meeting was scheduled for the next morning. Emergency board session. Full attendance required. They wanted control back. They wanted to prove I didn't belong. And most importantly, they wanted to do it publicly, just like the wedding. Funny how things come full circle. When I walked into that room, the energy was different. Not fearful this time. Calculated. Cold. Mrs. Carter sat straight, composed, like she had already won. Daniel sat beside her, still quiet, but this time, there was something else in his eyes. Guilt, and maybe regret. But again, too late. You called this meeting, I said calmly, taking my seat. Let's begin. Mrs. Carter folded her hands. Of course, she said smoothly. Then she looked around the table. As you all know, recent events have created instability. I didn't interrupt. I let her speak. Because sometimes, the best way to win is to let your opponent fully reveal their hand. We need leadership that understands this business, she continued, not someone who inherited it without experience. There it was, clean, direct, calculated. Several board members nodded slightly, not strongly, but enough. Enough to show influence. I propose a vote, she said. Propose a vote to appoint interim leadership. She didn't say her name. She didn't need to. Everyone knew what she wanted. I rested my hands on the table, calm, still. Are you finished? I asked. She smiled faintly. For now. I nodded, then looked around the room, at every face, every expression, every hesitation. Because hesitation is where truth lives. Before we vote, I said slowly. I think it's important that everyone here has all the information. Mrs. Carter's smile didn't fade, but something in her eyes shifted, just slightly, because she didn't know what I was about to say. And that made her uncomfortable. I slid a file across the table, not rushed, not dramatic, just precise. To be clear, I said, this isn't about emotion. I looked directly at her. It's about facts. One of the board members opened the file. His expression changed instantly. Confusion, then shock, then something else. Concern. What is this? He asked. I didn't answer him. Not yet. I kept my eyes on Mrs. Carter. Go ahead, I said quietly. Read it. More files opened, more silence. But this time, it wasn't empty. It was heavy, loaded, dangerous. Mrs. Carter's confidence started to crack. What exactly are you trying to do? She asked sharply. I leaned forward slightly. Finish what you started. That's when Daniel looked up, really looked, like he finally understood. But again, too late. These are internal records, I said calmly. Financial transfers, unauthorized approvals, misuse of company funds. The words landed slowly, but heavily, each one hitting harder than the last. That's a lie, Mrs. Carter snapped immediately, but her voice wasn't steady anymore. Is it? I asked. I nodded toward the documents. Because the signatures say otherwise. One of the board members cleared his throat. These transactions, he said carefully, they weren't disclosed. Another one added quietly, this could be a serious violation. The room shifted. Completely. This wasn't about leadership anymore. This was about accountability. And suddenly, the power dynamic changed again. Mrs. Carter stood up. This is manipulation, she said. You're trying to twist things. I'm revealing them, I said calmly. The same words my father had used. And now, they carried the same weight. You questioned my experience, I continued. That's fair. I nodded slightly. But experience doesn't excuse this. I tapped the file lightly. And power doesn't protect you from consequences. Silence. No arguments. No interruptions. Because truth, when presented clearly, doesn't need defending. Daniel stood up slowly. Mom, he said quietly. But she didn't look at him. Didn't respond. Because she already knew. The room wasn't hers anymore. The control was gone. I stood up, not aggressively, not emotionally, just final. This vote, I said calmly, is no longer necessary. I paused, let it settle. Because the issue isn't leadership. I looked directly at her. It's integrity. Her face went completely still. No anger, no words, just realization. Effective immediately, I said. You are removed from all decision-making authority pending investigation. No shouting, no drama, just facts and consequences. The room didn't explode. It didn't react loudly. Because moments like this don't need noise. They carry their own weight. As I turned to leave, I stopped for just a second. Not for her, not for the board, but for myself. Because this was the moment everything truly ended. Not at the wedding, not at the first meeting, but here, where truth replaced illusion and respect replaced arrogance. I walked out of that room the same way I walked out of my wedding, calm, steady, certain. But this time, I wasn't leaving something behind. I was stepping into something new, something stronger, something earned. Outside, the sky was clear, bright, open, and for the first time in a long time, I felt the same way. Not broken, not hurt, not angry, just free. Later that evening, my father sat across from me again. Same calm presence, same quiet strength. "It's over?" he asked. I nodded. "Yes." He smiled slightly. "Good." Then after a moment he added, "You handled it better than I would have." I laughed softly. "I learned from you." And that was the truth. Because strength isn't about shouting or proving others wrong. It's about standing firm when everything tries to shake you. And in the end, that's what this was all about. Not revenge, not power, not money, but respect. The kind you don't demand, the kind you don't beg for, the kind you earn by never accepting less than you deserve. Because sometimes, the people who try to humiliate you don't realize something important. They're not exposing your weakness, they're revealing their own. And when the truth finally comes out, it doesn't just change the story, it rewrites it completely.